Laura Allen is the head of strategy for accessibility and disability inclusion at Google. She works across teams to improve the accessibility and usability of Google products and processes, and to make Google a more accessible and inclusive place for people with disabilities. So Laura, let's dig in. Can you give us an overview of what is considered assistive technology?
Yeah, so assistive technology can really encompass so many different things. I think about it as anything that can assist somebody with a disability to have a more inclusive and accessible experience. So this could be a specialized device, as you mentioned, like a specialized, refreshable braille display, things like that. It could also be different assistive tools built into devices. So in accessibility settings on your smartphone or in your browser, on your different laptops, things like that. I even go as far as to think of assistive technology as physical devices. So, for example, if someone's blind or low vision who uses a cane to navigate the world, or who's using a wheelchair for a mobility impairment, I think all of this kind of encompasses assistive technology. It's a really wide range.
So what is the goal of assistive technology?
So the goal of assistive technology is really to help to make a more inclusive and accessible and equitable experience for people with a wide range of disabilities. So for example, I happen to have a visual impairment, and it impacts everything that I look directly at. So for me, looking at a computer screen can be challenging. I'm not able to see all of the text. I'm not able to see a clear picture of the screen. So I use assistive technology to fill in those different gaps. So I listen to text read aloud. I also will invert my colors because I'm very light sensitive. I slightly enlarge the text. I use a larger mouse cursor. So I get to kind of customize and adapt my situation on my device to be really inclusive so that it works for me. So this is something that people with a wide range of disabilities can do, customize their situations and use the features that work best for them to get the most out of their technology.
What are some of the common uses of assistive technology for students with learning differences?
So there are lots of different features that you could use with students with learning disabilities. So I actually spent a number of years at Google working on the Chromebook accessibility team at Google. Chromebooks are being so heavily used across classrooms now, and there are lots of different features built in at the accessibility settings of Chromebooks. So one feature that actually can be very useful for students with learning disabilities is called Select to Speak. And what Select to Speak does is it allows you to select certain text on the screen or a certain section of the screen and have only that text read aloud to you. And you can have word-by-word highlighting of the text as it's read, so there's a better audio and visual connection. And there are some newer features as well within Select to Speak. So for example, if a student has difficulty focusing on the page and maybe they're getting distracted, you can set the Select to Speak feature so that it will shade the background content behind whatever you've selected. So if I just choose one paragraph, it will make that paragraph stand out. It will read everything to me and have the word-by-word highlighting, and then everything behind it will be shaded in gray, so it's not distracting me. It's not getting in the way of me learning. So that's one feature I would definitely suggest checking out. There are lots of other functionalities within it too, so you can pause and resume. You can speed up the speech rate and slow down. You can change the voices. You can change that word-by-word highlighting color if certain colors are most useful for certain students. So lots of different ways that you can customize that feature. And on Chromebooks, we also have another feature called Focus Highlights, which essentially will help to draw a colorful focus ring around key parts of the screen. So around the mouse cursor as you move it, around the text caret as you're typing, and around the item that has your keyboard focus. So if you're pressing the tab key or the arrows, for example. And what this does is it helps to create more visual connection to the screen, and it can help so that you're not getting as distracted. If you're typing and you want to keep your eyes on where you're typing, it's got this nice colorful circle there for you just to stay engaged and to stay focused on that core content. So lots of different types of features that you can customize on a Chromebook.
Where does the accessibility of universal design end and assistive technology begin?
So yeah, when you think about universal design for learning and inclusive design, it's so important as people are building out technology. So you can think about it in a few different ways. One way is that we have to build assistive technology tools into our devices, like some of the features I just mentioned that are built into Chromebooks or are built into Android devices, just as an example. But there are also, it's so important that as you're on a device and you're navigating different applications or you're navigating the web, that people have put design consideration into all of those different sites and all of those services and products as well. So that's where this concept of inclusive design or universal design for learning is so important. And in schools, this is most important, thinking about, is educational material accessible? So we have tools to be able to access. We have screen reading technology and magnification and switch control, all sorts of different assistive tech tools. But we have to make sure that the actual material, the classroom materials, the lessons, we have to make sure those are accessible as well. So if we have, a lesson that's being sent out, is it something that has really strong contrast for somebody who might be low vision? Is it something that can be listened to through a screen reader? If it's a video, are there captions? Otherwise, a student will have to use automatic captions, which is certainly available. We have many different features for automatic captions, but a best practice for a teacher, of course, is to add manual captions and make sure they are fully accurate. So there's this concept of just making sure that whatever materials or whatever websites that we're accessing, we need to make sure that they are also accessible and inclusive. So it's up to technology companies, it's also up to web developers and app developers, it's up to educators to be prioritizing inclusion.
Since individualized education program teams at schools are required to consider the need for assistive technology, parents are afforded an opportunity to encourage a thoughtful discussion of the potential use of the tools for their child. What should parents ask to steer the conversation and ensure that their kids receive the proper tools possible to help them succeed?
That's a really great question. And I think you're so right. It's so important for parents to be getting involved in these conversations and help to be champions for their children with learning disabilities or any disability. I know that I was so grateful for my parents getting involved when I was young, going through disability changes and not necessarily knowing how to advocate for myself. So I do think that is so important. And asking questions about, what will the classroom environment look like? Will there be group work? And what sort of technology will my child be using? Will there be accessibility considerations for the technology? Or will my student be able to, or will my child be able to have extra time if needed on an exam or an assignment? Just getting that relationship with the educator is really important, and being able to have that communication, because of course, as you know, through any given year of school, things come up and you need to be able to pivot and adapt and be able to, get back to being able to get the materials fully accessibly. So it's really about a two-way communication path. And I will say also, we've heard a lot of educators and parents and guardians using things like, for example, Google Forms, where sometimes they'll use a Google form to track things in an IEP. And they can have each teacher that a student is working with fill it out at different points of the year. And then it's, there's a nice timestamp, and you can look at the different responses that are being submitted and track a student's progress. But it's just a nice way to be able to see, well, how are we doing with everything that's in the student's IEP? Are we making progress, and is the student progressing as we'd like to see? So different tips like that you can also talk with the school about, of how do we not only enable the student, but how do we track progress and make sure that they're comfortable.
Many classrooms around the country are stocked with Chromebooks. Are Chromebooks in and of themselves assistive technology?
It's a great question. I do think there's so much assistive technology that is built into Chromebooks now. Just right within accessibility settings, there are lots of different features, again, from text to speech to magnification to contrast inversion. to navigating with the switch controller. There are many more different features. But I will say that having that evaluation is still very, very important, because a student, especially a young student, perhaps who's navigating their disability early on and they don't necessarily know what are the right tools for them, having that sort of evaluation to deep dive into the tools that are available to them can be absolutely transformational. So yes, we have the tools, but we also need educators and parents and guardians to be empowered with the knowledge of advising their students on how to best use the device and how to get the most out of the device. So I do think that there is a combination that's needed there.
As the Google suite of tools becomes more ubiquitous and the go-to tools on the web, what's new in the Google realm in terms of assistive technology?
There are lots of new tools. There are lots of things built in across different devices. So, for example, the ability to have live captions across so many different Google products. So you can have live automatic captions across Google Meet video conferencing, across the Chrome browser as you're accessing video content or even just audio like podcasts. There's also a feature on Android called Live Transcribe, which has automatic live transcription and live captioning that you could use out in the real world as you're having conversations. There's also a lot of cool new features that have to do with as you're navigating the world. So, for example, in Google Maps, there's a feature called Accessible Places, which can help you to get more information about the accessibility of a restaurant or a store or a place of business. Of, is there an accessible entrance, or are there accessible restrooms or parking spots? And you can just turn that on within settings and just get more information about where you're going to make sure it will be an inclusive experience. So, we're constantly working on building out new features and new functionality for people with disabilities, and we're working with people with disabilities at Google as well as out in the community, because building with people is so important to the process. So we're excited about what's been released in the past few years, and definitely excited about what's to come as well.
Laura Allen, thanks for the knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.